The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the small town where the story begins. In a modest house at the edge of the neighborhood, a family was going through one of the toughest times of their lives. The father, a kind and hard-working man, had passed away after a long battle with illness. His absence left a void that seemed impossible to fill. His wife, a gentle woman with a heart full of love, was doing her best to hold everything together. Their 2 children, a son in his early 20s and a daughter still in her teens, were struggling to come to terms with the loss. The family, once so close, now felt distant, each member lost in their own world of grief. The father had always been the glue that held them together. He was the one who made them laugh during tough times, who reminded them to appreciate the little things, and who always had a way of making everyone feel loved. Without him, the house felt empty, and the silence was deafening. Days turned into weeks, and the family drifted further apart. The son buried himself in work, trying to stay busy so he wouldn't have to think about the pain. The daughter spent most of her time in her room, lost in her thoughts. The mother tried to reach out to both of them, but it felt like her words were falling on deaf ears. One evening, as the mother was cleaning out the father's old desk, she found something that would change everything. Tucked away in a drawer, hidden beneath a stack of old papers, was a small, neatly wrapped box. Attached to it was a note written in the father's familiar handwriting. Her hands trembled as she picked it up and read the words, "To my family, when the time is right." Her heart raced as she called her children into the room. They gathered around the desk, their curiosity piqued by the mysterious box. The son, usually reserved, was the first to speak. "What do you think it is?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The daughter, her eyes wide with anticipation, reached out to touch the box. "Maybe it's something he wanted us to have after he was gone," she said softly. The mother nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "Let's open it together," she suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. As they carefully unwrapped the box, they found a small, old-fashioned tape recorder inside. The father had always loved technology, even the outdated kind, and this recorder was one of his prized possessions. Along with the recorder was a cassette tape labeled "For My Family." The son quickly found some batteries and inserted them into the recorder. The room fell silent as they pressed play, and the sound of their father's voice filled the air. "Hello, my loves," the recording began, his voice warm and familiar. "If you're listening to this, it means I'm no longer with you. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there to say goodbye in person, but I hope this message will help bring you some comfort." The family listened intently, hanging on to every word. The father's voice was calm and reassuring, just as they remembered it. He spoke about how much he loved them, how proud he was of each of them, and how he wanted them to continue living their lives to the fullest. But then, his tone shifted slightly, and he said something that caught them all off guard. "I know things haven't been easy since I've been gone, and I can only imagine how much you're all hurting. But I want you to do something for me. I want you to come together as a family, just like we used to. I've left you a little challenge, and I hope it will help you find your way back to each other." The family exchanged puzzled glances. What kind of challenge could he have left for them? The father's voice continued, "In the box, you'll find a set of clues. Each clue will lead you to a place that was special to us as a family. Follow them, and at the end, you'll find something I've left for you. But remember, this isn't just about finding what's at the end. It's about the journey you'll take together. Please, do this for me." The recording ended, leaving the family in stunned silence. The son was the first to break it. "What do you think he meant by clues?" he asked, looking at the box. The mother reached inside and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a piece of paper with a riddle written on it. The daughter read it aloud, "Where we shared our first picnic, under the shade of the old oak tree." The family looked at each other, realization dawning on their faces. They knew exactly where the first clue was pointing them. It was the park where they used to spend Sunday afternoons together, back when life was simpler. The father had always loved that spot, and it was where they had shared countless memories as a family. Without hesitation, they decided to follow the clue. As they left the house and made their way to the park, something unexpected happened. For the first time in weeks, they were talking to each other, sharing stories about the father and reminiscing about the good times. The tension that had been between them seemed to melt away, replaced by a sense of connection they hadn't felt in a long time. When they reached the park, they found the old oak tree standing tall and majestic, just as they remembered it. Beneath its branches, they discovered another envelope, this one containing a photograph of the family from one of their picnics. On the back of the photo was a message from the father, "Remember this day? It was one of my happiest. Keep going, my loves. The next clue is waiting." As they stood there, holding the photograph and reading the message, they felt a surge of emotion. It was as if the father was right there with them, guiding them on this journey. The son put his arm around his sister, and the mother smiled through her tears. For the first time since his passing, they felt a glimmer of hope. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would not only bring them closer together but also help them heal in ways they never imagined. The father's last gift was more than just a message, it was a chance for them to rediscover the love and bond they had always shared. And as they left the park, ready to follow the next clue, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The family stood under the old oak tree, the photograph clutched tightly in the mother's hands. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, painting the park in hues of orange and pink. For a moment, they just stood there, silent, letting the weight of the moment sink in. The father's voice, though no longer physically present, felt closer than it had in weeks. His words had stirred something deep within them, a longing to reconnect, not just with his memory, but with each other. The son broke the silence. "Where do you think the next clue is?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. The daughter, still holding the envelope, turned it over in her hands. "There's nothing else written here," she said, frowning. "But maybe we're missing something." The mother, ever the practical one, suggested they look at the photograph again. "Your father was always so thoughtful. He wouldn't leave us without a way to move forward." They huddled together, examining the photo under the fading light. It was a simple picture, the four of them sitting on a checkered blanket, the oak tree in the background, plates of sandwiches and fruit spread out in front of them. The father was mid-laugh, his arm around the mother, while the children were caught in a playful moment, the son pretending to steal a grape from his sister's plate. It was a snapshot of happiness, a memory frozen in time. Then the daughter noticed something. "Look at the corner of the blanket," she said, pointing. In the photo, the edge of the blanket was folded over, revealing a small, embroidered design, a tiny compass. "That's strange," the son said, squinting at it. "I don't remember the blanket having that." The mother's eyes lit up. "Your father must have added it to the photo as a clue. A compass, maybe it's pointing us somewhere." The son pulled out his phone and opened a map of the area. If the compass is pointing north, then, he traced a line from the park in the direction of north. "There's a lake about a mile from here. We used to go there sometimes, remember?" The daughter nodded slowly. "Yeah, we'd feed the ducks and skip stones. Dad loved that place." The mother smiled faintly. "Then that's where we'll go next." As they walked to the lake, the conversation flowed more easily than it had in weeks. The son talked about his work, something he rarely did, and the daughter shared stories from school. The mother listened, chiming in with her own anecdotes, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like they were a family again. The father's challenge was already working its magic, pulling them out of their individual shells and reminding them of the bond they shared. When they reached the lake, the scene was just as they remembered it, calm, serene, with ducks gliding across the water. The sun had nearly set, and the first stars were beginning to twinkle in the sky. They walked along the shore, searching for anything that might resemble a clue. After a few minutes, the daughter spotted something glinting in the grass. She bent down and picked it up, a small, metal key with a tag attached to it. The tag read, "For the next step, think of where we kept our treasures." The son scratched his head. Where we kept our treasures? What does that mean? The mother thought for a moment, then her face brightened. The shed, she said. Your father used to call it his treasure chest. He kept all sorts of things in there, old tools, fishing gear, even some of your childhood toys. The daughter nodded eagerly. Yeah, I remember. He'd let us play in there sometimes. It was like our little hideout. The shed was back at the house, so they made their way home, the key clutched tightly in the mother's hand. When they arrived, they headed straight to the backyard, where the small wooden shed stood. It was weathered and worn, but it held countless memories. The son inserted the key into the lock, and with a soft click, the door creaked open. Inside, the shed was just as they remembered, cluttered but cozy, filled with the father's belongings. The mother flicked on the light, and they began to search for the next clue. It didn't take long for the daughter to find it. Taped to the inside of an old fishing tackle box was another envelope. She opened it and read the message aloud, "To find the next clue, follow the path of the stars." The son frowned. The path of the stars? What's that supposed to mean? The mother thought for a moment, then her eyes widened. The telescope, she said. Your father loved stargazing. He used to set up the telescope in the backyard and show you both the constellations. The daughter's face lit up. Yeah, he taught us how to find the North Star and Orion's belt. Maybe the clue is somewhere near the telescope. They hurried back outside, where the telescope was still set up, just as the father had left it. The son adjusted the lens and peered through it, but he didn't see anything unusual. The daughter, however, noticed something on the tripod, a small piece of paper taped to one of the legs. She carefully peeled it off and unfolded it. Written on the paper was a set of coordinates. Coordinates, the son said, taking the paper from her. Where do these lead? He entered the numbers into his phone and waited for the map to load. When it did, he looked up, surprised. It's pointing to the old cabin, he said. The one we used to visit in the mountains. The mother's eyes filled with tears. That was his favorite place, she said softly. He always said it was where he felt closest to nature. The cabin was a few hours' drive away, and it was already getting late. The mother suggested they wait until the next day to continue their journey. Your father wouldn't want us rushing, she said. Let's take our time and do this right. The children agreed, and they spent the rest of the evening preparing for the trip. They packed snacks, blankets, and a thermos of hot cocoa, just like they used to do when the father was alive. As they sat together that night, the atmosphere in the house felt different, lighter, warmer. The father's absence still weighed heavily on their hearts, but his presence was felt in every clue, every memory, every step they took together. His last gift was more than just a message, it was a reminder of the love that had always bound them as a family. The next morning, they set off early, the coordinates guiding them to the mountains. The drive was quiet but comfortable, each of them lost in their thoughts but connected by a shared purpose. When they finally reached the cabin, nestled in a clearing surrounded by tall pine trees, they felt a sense of anticipation. What would they find here? What was the next clue? And more importantly, what was the father's ultimate message? As they stepped out of the car and approached the cabin, they noticed something hanging from the front door, a small, wooden box with a note attached. The note read, "You've come so far. The next step is inside." The mother reached out and took the box, her hands trembling slightly. She opened it to find another cassette tape, just like the first one. The son set up the old tape recorder they had brought with them, and they gathered around as the father's voice filled the air once more. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice warm and full of love. "You followed the clues, just like I knew you would. But this journey isn't over yet. Inside the cabin, you'll find the next part of the challenge. Remember, this is about more than just finding what I've left for you. It's about finding each other again." With those words echoing in their hearts, they stepped inside the cabin, ready to continue the journey the father had set for them. Little did they know, the most emotional and transformative part of the challenge was yet to come. The cabin was exactly as they remembered it, cozy, rustic, and filled with memories. The wooden walls were adorned with old photographs, and the scent of pine filled the air. The family stood in the doorway for a moment, taking it all in. It felt like stepping back in time, to a place where life was simpler and their bond as a family was unshakable. The mother was the first to step inside, her eyes scanning the room for the next clue. The son and daughter followed, their curiosity piqued. The father's voice still echoed in their minds, urging them to continue the journey. "What do you think we're supposed to find here?" the daughter asked, her voice soft but eager. The son shrugged, but his eyes were bright with anticipation. "Let's look around. He wouldn't make it too hard for us." They began searching the cabin, each of them drawn to different corners. The mother went to the small kitchen area, where the father used to make his famous pancakes on Sunday mornings. The son checked the living room, where they had spent countless evenings playing board games by the fire. The daughter wandered into the small bedroom, where bunk beds still stood, a reminder of the nights they had spent whispering and laughing until they fell asleep. It was the daughter who found the next clue. Tucked under the pillow of the bottom bunk was a small, leather-bound journal. She picked it up and called out to the others. "I think I found something." Her voice was filled with excitement as she held up the journal. The mother and son hurried over, and together they opened it. Inside the journal was a letter from the father, written in his familiar handwriting. The mother read it aloud, her voice trembling with emotion. "My dearest family, if you've made it this far, it means you've followed the clues and remembered the places that were special to us. But this journey isn't just about the past, it's about the future. I want you to take a moment to think about what truly matters. What brings you together? What makes you strong? Write your thoughts in this journal, and when you're ready, the next clue will reveal itself." The family looked at each other, unsure of what to do next. The son was the first to speak. "I guess we're supposed to write something," he said, scratching his head. "But what?" The mother smiled gently. "Your father always believed in the power of words. Maybe he just wants us to share what's in our hearts." The daughter nodded, her eyes shining. "I'll go first." She took the journal and sat down on the edge of the bunk bed. For a moment, she was silent, her pen hovering over the page. Then she began to write. "Dear Dad," she started, her handwriting neat and careful. "I miss you so much. It's been hard without you, but doing this challenge has made me feel closer to you, and to Mom and my brother. I've realized how much I've been holding inside, and I want to start opening up more. I love you, and I'll always carry you in my heart." When she finished, she handed the journal to her brother. He hesitated for a moment, then took it and began to write. "Dad, I've been so focused on work lately, trying to keep myself busy so I don't have to think about how much I miss you. But this journey has reminded me of what's really important, family. I'm sorry for pulling away. I want to be there for Mom and my sister, just like you always were for us." Finally, the mother took the journal. Her hands shook slightly as she wrote. "My love, not a day goes by that I don't think of you. You were my rock, my partner, my best friend. I've been trying to stay strong for the kids, but I've felt so lost without you. This challenge has reminded me of the love we shared and the family we built together. I promise to keep that love alive, for you and for our children." As they finished writing, something unexpected happened. The journal began to emit a soft, glowing light. The family stared in awe as the light grew brighter, illuminating the room. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the light faded, leaving behind a small, folded piece of paper that had been hidden within the journal's spine. The daughter carefully unfolded it and read the message aloud. To find the next clue, follow the sound of the wind. The son frowned. The sound of the wind? What does that mean? The mother thought for a moment, then her face lit up. The wind chimes, she said. Your father loved those wind chimes he hung outside the cabin. He said their music reminded him of the beauty of nature. The daughter nodded eagerly. Let's go listen. They stepped outside, where the wind chimes hung from a tree branch, swaying gently in the breeze. The soft, melodic sound filled the air, calming and soothing. They stood there for a moment, listening, until the son noticed something. Look, he said, pointing to one of the chimes. Tied to it was a small, rolled-up piece of paper. The daughter reached up and untied it, unrolling it to reveal another riddle. Where the water meets the sky, and the earth touches the heavens, you'll find what you seek. The mother's eyes widened. The waterfall, she said. There's a waterfall not far from here. Your father used to say it was where the water met the sky and the earth touched the heavens. He loved that place. The son nodded. Then that's where we'll go next. They packed up their things and set off on the trail that led to the waterfall. The hike was steep and challenging, but the family supported each other, just as the father would have wanted. Along the way, they talked and laughed, sharing stories and memories. It felt like the walls they had built around themselves were slowly crumbling, replaced by a renewed sense of connection. When they finally reached the waterfall, the sight took their breath away. The water cascaded down the rocks, sparkling in the sunlight, and a rainbow arched across the mist. It was a place of pure beauty, just as the father had described. They stood there for a moment, taking it all in, until the daughter spotted something glinting near the base of the waterfall. Over there, she called, pointing. They made their way to the spot and found a small, waterproof box tucked between the rocks. Inside was another cassette tape and a note that read, "You've come so far, my loves. The next part of the journey will test your hearts, but I know you're strong enough to face it together. Press play when you're ready." The son set up the tape recorder, and they gathered around as the father's voice filled the air once more. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice warm and full of love. "You followed the clues and remembered the places that were special to us. But this journey isn't just about the past, it's about the future. The next clue will take you to a place where you'll have to face your fears and lean on each other. Remember, you're stronger together than you are apart." As the recording ended, the family felt a mix of emotions, excitement, nervousness, and a deep sense of love. They didn't know what the next clue would bring, but they knew they would face it together. The father's last gift was more than just a message, it was a journey of healing, connection, and rediscovery. And as they left the waterfall, ready to continue the challenge, they felt closer to each other, and to him, than they had in a long time. The family stood at the edge of the waterfall, the sound of rushing water filling the air. The father's voice still echoed in their minds, urging them to face their fears and lean on each other. The next clue was out there, waiting for them, but they had no idea what it would entail. All they knew was that they had to keep moving forward, together. The mother was the first to speak. "Where do you think we're supposed to go next?" she asked, her voice steady but tinged with curiosity. The son pulled out the note they had found in the waterproof box and read it again, "Where the water meets the sky, and the earth touches the heavens." He frowned, thinking hard. "We're already at the waterfall. What else could it mean?" The daughter, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly spoke up. "What about the cave?" she asked, her eyes lighting up. "Remember the cave behind the waterfall? Dad used to take us there when we were kids. He said it was like a secret world, where the earth and the sky came together." The mother's face brightened. "Of course. The cave. That must be it. They made their way carefully around the edge of the waterfall, the mist cooling their faces as they approached the hidden entrance to the cave. It was just as they remembered, dark, mysterious, and slightly intimidating. The son pulled out a flashlight from his backpack, and they stepped inside, the beam of light cutting through the darkness. The cave was damp and cool, with walls that glistened in the light. They moved slowly, their footsteps echoing softly. The father had always loved this place, and being here now felt like stepping into one of his stories. As they ventured deeper, the daughter noticed something carved into the wall. "Look," she said, pointing. The sun shone the light on the carving, revealing a series of symbols and arrows. "It's a map," the mother said, her voice filled with awe. "Your father must have left it for us." They followed the arrows, which led them through a narrow passage and into a larger chamber. In the center of the chamber was a small, wooden chest. The daughter rushed over and opened it, revealing another cassette tape and a note. The note read, "You faced the darkness and found your way. But the next part of the journey will test your hearts. Listen carefully, and remember, you're stronger together than you are apart." The son set up the tape recorder, and they gathered around as the father's voice filled the cave. "My dearest family," he began, his voice warm and reassuring. "I'm so proud of how far you've come. But the next part of the journey will challenge you in ways you might not expect. You'll need to face your fears and trust each other completely. Remember, I'm always with you, guiding you every step of the way." As the recording ended, the family felt a mix of emotions, anticipation, nervousness, and a deep sense of determination. They didn't know what the next clue would bring, but they were ready to face it together. The mother reached out and took her children's hands, squeezing them gently. "Whatever comes next, we'll do it as a family," she said, her voice firm. They left the cave and made their way back to the cabin, where they spent the night preparing for the next part of the journey. The next morning, they set off early, following the directions from the map they had found in the cave. The trail led them deeper into the mountains, through dense forests and across rocky terrain. It was a challenging hike, but they supported each other every step of the way. After several hours, they reached a clearing at the top of a hill. In the center of the clearing was a large, ancient tree, its branches stretching toward the sky. Tied to one of the branches was a small, wooden box. The daughter climbed up to retrieve it, her hands trembling with excitement. Inside the box was another cassette tape and a note that read, "You've reached the heart of the journey. The next clue will take you to a place where you'll have to face your deepest fears. But remember, you're not alone. You have each other, and you have me." The son set up the tape recorder, and they gathered around as the father's voice filled the air once more. "My loves," he began, his voice soft but full of love. "You've come so far, and I'm so proud of you. But the next part of the journey will test your hearts in ways you might not expect. You'll need to face your fears and trust each other completely. Remember, I'm always with you, guiding you every step of the way." As the recording ended, the family felt a mix of emotions, anticipation, nervousness, and a deep sense of determination. They didn't know what the next clue would bring, but they were ready to face it together. The mother reached out and took her children's hands, squeezing them gently. "Whatever comes next, we'll do it as a family," she said, her voice firm. They left the clearing and continued their journey, following the directions from the map. The trail led them deeper into the mountains, through dense forests and across rocky terrain. It was a challenging hike, but they supported each other every step of the way. After several hours, they reached a clearing at the top of a hill. In the center of the clearing was a large, ancient tree, its branches stretching toward the sky. Tied to one of the branches was a small, wooden box. The daughter climbed up to retrieve it, her hands trembling with excitement. Inside the box was another cassette tape and a note that read, "You've reached the heart of the journey. The next clue will take you to a place where you'll have to face your deepest fears. But remember, you're not alone. You have each other, and you have me. The son set up the tape recorder, and they gathered around as the father's voice filled the air once more. My loves, he began, his voice soft but full of love. You've come so far, and I'm so proud of you. But the next part of the journey will test your hearts in ways you might not expect. You'll need to face your fears and trust each other completely. Remember, I'm always with you, guiding you every step of the way. As the recording ended, the family felt a mix of emotions, anticipation, nervousness, and a deep sense of determination. They didn't know what the next clue would bring, but they were ready to face it together. The mother reached out and took her children's hands, squeezing them gently. Whatever comes next, we'll do it as a family, she said, her voice firm. The family stood at the edge of the clearing, the ancient tree towering above them. The father's voice still lingered in their minds, urging them to face their fears and trust each other. The next clue was out there, waiting for them, but they had no idea what it would entail. All they knew was that they had to keep moving forward, together. The mother was the first to speak. Where do you think we're supposed to go next? She asked, her voice steady but tinged with curiosity. The son pulled out the note they had found in the wooden box and read it again. You've reached the heart of the journey. The next clue will take you to a place where you'll have to face your deepest fears. But remember, you're not alone. You have each other, and you have me. The daughter, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly spoke up. What about the old bridge? She asked, her eyes lighting up. Remember the bridge we used to cross when we went hiking with Dad? He said it was a test of courage because it was so high and shaky. The mother's face brightened. Of course. The bridge. That must be it. They made their way carefully through the forest, following the trail that led to the old bridge. It was just as they remembered, narrow, rickety, and suspended high above a rushing river. The son pulled out a flashlight from his backpack, and they stepped onto the bridge, the wooden planks creaking under their weight. The bridge was damp and slippery, with gaps between the planks that revealed the river below. They moved slowly, their footsteps echoing softly. The father had always loved this place, and being here now felt like stepping into one of his stories. As they ventured further, the daughter noticed something carved into the railing. Look, she said, pointing. The sun shone the light on the carving, revealing a series of symbols and arrows. It's a map, the mother said, her voice filled with awe. Your father must have left it for us. They followed the arrows, which led them across the bridge and into a dense thicket. In the center of the thicket was a small, wooden chest. The daughter rushed over and opened it, revealing another cassette tape and a note. The note read, "You've faced the darkness and found your way. But the next part of the journey will test your hearts. Listen carefully, and remember, you're stronger together than you are apart." The son set up the tape recorder, and they gathered around as the father's voice filled the air. My dearest family, he began, his voice warm and reassuring. I'm so proud of how far you've come. But the next part of the journey will challenge you in ways you might not expect. You'll need to face your fears and trust each other completely. Remember, I'm always with you, guiding you every step of the way. As the recording ended, the family felt a mix of emotions, anticipation, nervousness, and a deep sense of determination. They didn't know what the next clue would bring, but they were ready to face it together. The mother reached out and took her children's hands, squeezing them gently. Whatever comes next, we'll do it as a family, she said, her voice firm. They left the thicket and made their way back to the bridge, where they spent the night preparing for the next part of the journey. The next morning, they set off early, following the directions from the map they had found in the thicket. The trail led them deeper into the mountains, through dense forests and across rocky terrain. It was a challenging hike, but they supported each other every step of the way. After several hours, they reached a clearing at the top of a hill. In the center of the clearing was a large, ancient tree, its branches stretching toward the sky. Tied to one of the branches was a small, wooden box. The daughter climbed up to retrieve it, her hands trembling with excitement. Inside the box was another cassette tape and a note that read, "You've reached the heart of the journey. The next clue will take you to a place where you'll have to face your deepest fears. But remember, you're not alone. You have each other, and you have me." The son set up the tape recorder, and they gathered around as the father's voice filled the air once more. "My loves," he began, his voice soft but full of love. "You've come so far, and I'm so proud of you. But the next part of the journey will test your hearts in ways you might not expect. You'll need to face your fears and trust each other completely. Remember, I'm always with you, guiding you every step of the way." As the recording ended, the family felt a mix of emotions, anticipation, nervousness, and a deep sense of determination. They didn't know what the next clue would bring, but they were ready to face it together. The mother reached out and took her children's hands, squeezing them gently. "Whatever comes next, we'll do it as a family," she said, her voice firm. They left the clearing and continued their journey, following the directions from the map. The trail led them deeper into the mountains, through dense forests and across rocky terrain. The family sat in silence, the weight of the father's words still hanging in the air. The video had ended, but his presence felt stronger than ever. It was as if he was still there, guiding them, urging them to take the next step. The room was filled with a mix of emotions, sadness, regret, but also a growing sense of hope. The father's message had done something extraordinary. It had reminded them of who they were and what they had lost. Now, it was up to them to rebuild what had been broken. The eldest son, who had always been the most reserved, was the first to speak. I think we need to talk," he said, his voice shaky but determined. "We've been avoiding this for too long. Dad's right. We can't keep living like this." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that everyone felt. The others nodded, their eyes meeting for the first time in what felt like years. It was a small step, but it was a start. The mother, who had been quietly crying throughout the video, wiped her tears and took a deep breath. "He always knew how to bring us together," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Even when we were at our worst, he never gave up on us. We owe it to him to try." Her words resonated with everyone. They all knew how much the father had loved them, how much he had sacrificed for their happiness. Now, it was their turn to honor his memory by healing the wounds that had torn them apart. The youngest daughter, who had always been the most emotional, spoke next. "I miss him so much," she said, her voice breaking. "But I also miss us. I miss the way we used to be. We used to laugh together, remember? We used to be a family." Her words struck a chord with everyone. They all remembered those happier times, the family dinners, the holidays, the simple moments that had once brought them so much joy. It was those memories that gave them the strength to keep going. As the night went on, the family began to open up in ways they hadn't in years. They talked about their struggles, their regrets, and their hopes for the future. It wasn't easy, there were moments of tension, moments when old wounds threatened to reopen, but they pushed through. They knew it was the only way to move forward. The father's message had given them a roadmap, but it was up to them to follow it. One by one, they began to make small promises to each other. The eldest son promised to be more present, to stop burying himself in work and start spending more time with his family. The mother promised to let go of her anger, to stop holding on to the past and start focusing on the future. The youngest daughter promised to be more patient, to stop letting her emotions get the best of her. They knew these promises wouldn't fix everything overnight, but they were a start. And for the first time in a long time, they felt like a family again. As the night turned into early morning, the family decided to take one final step. They gathered around the father's old photo album, flipping through the pages and reminiscing about the good times. They laughed, they cried, and for a moment, it felt like he was there with them, smiling down on them. It was a bittersweet moment, but it was also a reminder of what they had lost, and what they still had. By the time the sun began to rise, the family felt a sense of peace they hadn't felt in years. The father's message had done more than bring them together, it had given them a second chance. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they also knew they wouldn't have to walk it alone. They had each other, and that was enough. As they finally went to bed, exhausted but hopeful, they couldn't help but feel grateful. Grateful for the father who had loved them so much, even in his final moments. Grateful for the message that had brought them back together. And most of all, grateful for the chance to start over. The father's last gift had been more than just a message, it had been a lifeline. And they were determined to hold on to it, no matter what. The days that followed were filled with small but meaningful changes. The family had made a promise to each other, and they were determined to keep it. It wasn't always easy, old habits and old hurt sometimes resurfaced, but they were trying. And that was what mattered. The father's message had given them a new perspective, a new way of looking at each other and at themselves. They were no longer just individuals living under the same roof, they were a family again. The eldest son, true to his word, started coming home earlier from work. He made an effort to sit down for dinner with everyone, something he hadn't done in years. At first, it felt awkward, like they were all strangers trying to make conversation. But slowly, the walls began to come down. They started sharing stories about their day, laughing at silly jokes, and even arguing about small things, normal family stuff. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like they were moving in the right direction. The mother, too, was making changes. She had always been the glue that held the family together, but over the years, she had become bitter and resentful. The father's message had reminded her of the love she once had for her family, and she was determined to find it again. She started letting go of the small things that used to bother her, like the mess in the living room or the dishes left in the sink. Instead, she focused on the bigger picture, on the people she loved and the time they had together. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. The youngest daughter, who had always been the most emotional, was also trying to change. She had a tendency to let her feelings get the best of her, often leading to arguments and misunderstandings. But now, she was learning to take a step back, to think before she spoke. It wasn't always successful, there were still moments when she lost her temper, but she was getting better. And her family noticed. They started to see her not as the difficult one, but as someone who was trying, just like them. As the weeks turned into months, the family began to find a new rhythm. They started doing things together again, like going for walks, watching movies, or just sitting around the table talking. It wasn't always easy, there were still moments of tension and frustration, but they were learning to navigate them. They were learning to listen to each other, to forgive each other, and to love each other in a way they hadn't in years. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, the mother brought up the father's message again. "I've been thinking a lot about what he said," she began, her voice soft but steady. "About how we need to let go of the past and focus on the future. I think he was right. We can't change what's happened, but we can change how we move forward." Her words resonated with everyone. They all knew she was right. The past was behind them, and the future was theirs to shape. The eldest son nodded. "I think Dad would be proud of us," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "We're not perfect, but we're trying. And that's what matters." His words brought tears to everyone's eyes. They all felt the same way. The father's message had been a gift, but it was also a challenge to be better, to do better. And they were rising to it. The youngest daughter, who had been quiet for most of the conversation, finally spoke up. I think we should do something for him," she said, her voice trembling. "Something to honor his memory. Maybe we could plant a tree or create a scrapbook or, I don't know, something that reminds us of him." Her suggestion was met with nods of agreement. They all wanted to do something to honor the father who had given them so much. In the end, they decided to plant a tree in the backyard. It was a simple gesture, but it felt right. They chose a spot where the father used to sit and read, a place that had always been his favorite. As they dug the hole and placed the tree in the ground, they felt a sense of peace. It was as if the father was there with them, watching over them, smiling down on them. When the tree was finally planted, they stood around it in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The mother was the first to speak. "This tree is like us," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "It's small now, but it will grow. And as it grows, it will remind us of him, of the love he had for us and the love we have for each other." Her words brought tears to everyone's eyes. They all felt the same way. The tree was more than just a tree, it was a symbol of their family, of their love, and of the father who had brought them back together. As they stood there, holding hands and looking at the tree, they felt a sense of closure. The father's message had done what he had hoped it would, it had brought them back together. But it had also done something more. It had reminded them of what was truly important: family, love, and the time they had together. They knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but they also knew they wouldn't have to walk it alone. They had each other, and that was enough. As the sun set and the sky turned a deep shade of orange, they made one final promise to each other: to never forget the father's message, to never take each other for granted, and to always remember the love that had brought them back together. It was a promise they intended to keep, no matter what. And as they walked back into the house, hand in hand, they knew that the father's last gift had been more than just a message, it had been a new beginning.